video at a different time today. I may do a video later as well. Today I'm just on the way to the gym, and I thought this would be an interesting topic to talk about. Kind of carrying on from where I left off in yesterday's video. Because many of you find that it's almost like the narcissist life, their existence, it kind of revolves around you. It's like everything they're doing, you are kind of the foundation of that. Even when it seems like they pretend to move on and they have this whole of life outside of you, you're kind of the glue that holds that together. You are the structure of it. And that's a big part of why the narcissist becomes obsessed with you. Because their foundation is very weak, or should I say it's non-existent. It's not really anything there, so what they need is a person to kind of set the stage for them. And this image that they are trying to construct or sustain, they need you to be the foundation, the structure, the basis for that. And that's how we often describe a primary source of supply as a source of security and stability. So that's kind of like your role in all of this. It's that you hold everything together for them. You're like the glue. And in many ways, you do give the narcissist a lot of motivation. You give them a purpose when otherwise there would not be one. And of course, in some ways that's not always a bad thing. That's like with what I do, talking about narcissists. It has changed a lot of people's lives. The problem is with what the narcissist is doing is that the way that they develop this obsession with you, and they villainize you and they seek to crucify you, it's actually all just a fantasy that they've made up inside their minds. It's a fabrication. And you may have a false impression of it, because what tends to happen is, as far as you know, as far as you can remember, something goes wrong. And then they begin devaluing you, they turn against you. They make it out like you're the problem, you've done something to them. And then from that point on, they are working on this smear campaign to, I mean, it's really just kind of to manage your perception of them more than anything else. And that really gives the game away. That reveals what is really going on with them and why they're so obsessed with you. It is all about perception management. And you got to think, why is that suddenly so important to them after being involved with you? Of course, it's because you have unknowingly rejected them in some way. You've disapproved of something they said or did. They make it out like it's something that you've done to them, but actually no. It's more based on what they've been doing to you. And if you take a step back and really look at the bigger picture, you will see that actually whatever they've made out that you were meant to have done to them, what they've done is far worse. And yet, while you had to be accountable for anything that went wrong, and you were running endlessly on this hamster wheel in an effort to make it right, they were never held accountable for anything. And that's a big part of their shame, because yes, they know they've done all of these things wrong, and then at the same time they haven't been accountable for any of it. So that shame, it resides within them, because it's a basic concept that most humans understand. If you do something wrong, then it's wrong, and you have to accept that, and you have to be held accountable for it. You have to face the consequences. This is something that has been understood always throughout human existence. But what the narcissist does is they try to justify what they do, and then they try to find ways to distort the information, distract you, get you to focus on something else, or to shift the blame onto you in some way. And it's all really just to avoid the accountability. Everything they do from that point on, it's all about avoiding accountability, avoiding self-reflection, and just putting it all onto you. That's all they're trying to do from that point on. And then that's why they become so obsessed with you. That's why they can't leave you alone. Because it's like you are the light. You are the bearer of truth. You've awakened and you understand what's really going on. You understand what they're capable of and what they have done to you, and how they try to evade the consequences of their actions. You understand all of that. And that light that you have is blinding them like sunlight to a vampire. It's like kryptonite, because it's like almost like they're having to see a reflection of themselves in the mirror. But don't get that confused. Narcissists, they can be somatic. It may seem as though they're in love with themselves. They admire their own reflection. But that's actually, it's a distorted perception of themselves. It's almost like they're seeing themselves through a broken prism. They don't actually see themselves as they actually are. Because when we're talking about ourself, who we actually are, our true identity, it's not just something where you could just pick and choose. Yes, this is who I am. This is who I want to be, based on the good deeds, the good things that I've done. You can't just choose yourself like that. Instead, what our self, our identity is based on is not only the good things that we've done, but the bad things as well. That makes up who we are. But of course, the narcissist doesn't want to accept that. And instead, they use these false characters. They're like shapeshifters, chameleons. They can be one person with you, and then the next situation, they're a completely different person with someone else. But then it's like, hold on a minute. What about what you were doing a moment before? Such as, if you're in the car with them and they're abusing you, they're attacking you, and then you go to some event, you go to a restaurant, and now all of a sudden they're just this kind, caring, law-abiding citizen. And it can be very confusing, because it's like, so does that mean that that person in the car who was abusing you, that's not who they really are? But actually, no, that is who they are. It's just they can disown parts of themselves from one moment to the next, depending on who they're dealing with. They're very fake. Very different to you. Because when they held you accountable for things, even things that you weren't really accountable for, you owned up to it. You're trying to be better, you're trying to change, and they really milked that out of you like they were milking a cow. They were really all over you with that. Because they saw that they could get you to think and believe whatever they wanted you to. They saw that they could get you to take accountability for things that you weren't even accountable for, or they could blow it out of proportion, exaggerate it, and make you feel like you're responsible for that, even though if you look back, they may have been the cause of it. So they really like to play on that. They use it to their advantage. But by doing that, they're just disowning more and more parts of themselves to the point where it's like there's not an authentic bone in their entire body. To the point where they can be capable of anything. They can be very unpredictable and you never know what they might do next. Because that's really our defense against narcissism. It's our defense against sociopathy, psychopathy, is our own self-love. Loving ourselves as we are. And yes, that does include accepting our faults and mistakes, our flaws and imperfections, instead of running away from them, instead of just deflecting it all onto someone else. And this is how you can see that the narcissist is really characterized by a lot of shame and self-hatred. They hate themselves because when someone loves themselves, the first thing they're going to do is take accountability. And if you look back throughout your relationship with a narcissist, that's all that you were doing. And even after the relationship, when they become obsessed with you and they smear your name, again, they're just holding you accountable for everything, blaming you for everything, things you're not even responsible for, because they recognize that you have the self-love, you have the self-esteem, where it's like you want things to be better, you want to correct it, including things that you haven't even done, and then they play on that. Well, as for them, they could have done so many things wrong to you in the relationship, and yet they just want to run away from all of that because they do not like themselves at all. They hate themselves, and that's why they hate taking accountability. And even when things just began to go wrong in the relationship, I mean, that's really what caused things to go wrong. It's that they couldn't take accountability for their actions, for the things that you disapproved of in them. When their mask began to slip and then they harmed you, they abused you, they didn't want to own up to that, they didn't want anything to do with it. All a narcissist is really doing is just, they're trying to discard themselves. It's like every time that they do something bad, something wrong, if there's ever an authentic part of them, then that's probably it. And yet they want to run away from that. Because anytime that they do something, they abuse you, it brings up shame. That shame, if anything's authentic about them, it's the shame. And then they've got to deflect it onto you. Their entire life is them just doing everything they can to run away from themselves. And that's also why at the end of the relationship they go to discrediting you. They discredit you because if you're authentic, if you stand in your truth, if you stand in who you actually are, then that shines the light on them. That's why they have to discredit you. They need you to be fake. Because otherwise it reflects just how fake they are. So that's why they have to discredit you. And that's really why they become obsessed with you, because you are real. You are authentic. You stand in your truth and your power. And they especially become obsessed with you when you stop enabling them. You stop enabling their self-destructive behavior, and instead you start confronting them, you hold them accountable for it. Or maybe you don't confront them at all, but you just leave them because you don't want to tolerate it anymore. And by doing that, rather than continuing to validate the false self, you're then giving them this reflection of themselves, of who they actually are based on what they've done. Because before that, they could justify it. They could just say, if they were that bad, then why are you still there? Why haven't you left? It's easy for them to say that, but then when you actually do try to leave, when you do try to get away from them, then they hold on to you. Then they keep coming back. And if they can't lure you back in for another round of abuse, then what they do is they run their smear campaign. And really what they're seeking, even when they're doing the smear campaign, it's all just validation. They need validation from you to tell them that they are okay, to tell them that what they did to you wasn't that bad. Because the last thing they want is to feel authentic. The last thing they want is to have to go within themselves. It's too painful for them to deal with the shame. And for them especially, because they've done so many things wrong. Maybe like a regular person, you may have done a few things wrong, but it's nothing that extreme. But with the narcissist, they have done an endless amount of things wrong. Deliberate things as well, and very extreme things. And of course, if they're to be held accountable just for one thing, it opens the floodgates to everything else. And it's very overwhelming for them. Which is why they do not want to be held accountable for anything. And instead, what they do, when you confront them, when you try to hold them accountable for anything, what do? They bail. They want to run away from it. What they're really running away from is themselves. They just look at it like, if this person that I was, if that's bad, if that's not good enough, if this person that I was has to be held accountable for something, then let me just be someone else. And so they look at it, and then that's exactly what they do. And then it becomes this habit where they become these chameleons, these shapeshifters, and then they're a different person from one situation to the next, depending on who they're around. And that's pretty much the reason why you can't hold them accountable for anything. Because the person that they were, even 5 minutes ago, who may have done something wrong to you, now they're someone else. And then before you know it, they could start a new life where there's someone else and now they're like a completely different person. And then it's like the person you knew, the person who harmed you, abused you, then it's like that person never even existed. So then it's like what they have to do is they have to find a way to just shift the blame onto you and hold you accountable for that. Because if there's one thing they do understand, is that if something goes wrong, then someone has to be held accountable for it. And that's why at the end of the relationship, what all narcissists do is they shift the blame onto the victim. They hold you accountable for everything that went wrong. But no matter what you do, and no matter how much you try to be better, it's never going to be enough for an insatiable narcissist. And the reason why it's never going to be enough and they can never be satisfied, the reason for that is because they're disconnected from themselves. They're disconnected from their own emotions. And what they really need to do to connect back to themselves is they need to connect back to their own emotions. They need to attend to that shame. But of course, that's something they do not want to do. And it's not like something where, I mean, when you're on them, when you're confronting them, of course, yes, that may be a difficult time for them to want to attend to that shame and to hold themselves accountable. But then even when you're not there, they're still not doing that. And that's how you could know a narcissist when they are 20 years old. And if you saw them again when they were 60, 70, they would still be the exact same person. They would still be a very immature, irresponsible, abusive, arrogant, entitled person who just believes that they can do whatever they want and just blames someone else for it. And this is why they become obsessed with you. Because it's almost like, temporarily at least, you heal their pain. You distract them from their trauma. And what is their trauma? As I said, it's not so much that of something that's been done to them. It's more about what they've been doing to other people. A long time ago in their childhood, they were confronted on something and they didn't like it, so they manipulated their parents. They coerced them in some way so that they could avoid accountability. Or they used a false character to get the validation from their parents and to avoid being disciplined. And this is what they've been doing throughout their lives. It's just using these different characters to avoid accountability and to evade the consequences, or they're shifting the blame onto someone else. And through doing that, they may think that they are evading their karma and that they're just getting away with it and it's not going to catch up to them. But actually, no, it's very damaging. As I mentioned before, studies show that bullies are at a 10 to 25 times more risk of developing a psychiatric condition than their own victims, as well as anxiety and depressive disorders, problems with work, relationships, substance abuse. And why is that? The reason why is because of the shame. That shame is due to a lack of connection with self. It's due to a lack of self-reflection and a lack of accountability. And that's really what perpetuates it. And the more that they blame you, they're really just resisting that change that should happen, but they won't let it happen because that shame is too painful for them. So they're resisting that by shifting it onto you and holding you accountable for what they've done wrong. And it's because they are very unconscious beings. Because they're shame-based, I mean, that is the lowest emotional vibrational frequency. Because of that, they can't actually see the damage that they are doing to themselves. They can't see that it's really perpetuating their shame. Of course it is. That's how they're shame-based people. Narcissistic people are shame-based. Yet the irony is, they're shame-based people who are doing everything they can to avoid reflecting on their shame. That's the funny thing about it. And you would think maybe they would make the connection and realise that, hold on a minute, so they're shame-based, but now at the same time they're doing everything they can to avoid reflecting on their shame, such as becoming obsessed with you and trying to resolve the trauma through you. You think they would come to the conclusion that what they're doing is not working, it's actually making them worse. But actually no, they can't see it because they're deflecting the shame. And that's how, even though they become obsessed with you, they may be stalking you on social media, they may be showing up at your house or your work, and you would think when a person's doing that, you think they would feel embarrassed about it. But no, they don't, because they're doing everything they can to avoid reflecting on their shame. They're deflecting the shame onto you. That is why you're always the one who is left feeling uncomfortable, self-conscious, destabilized, because you're taking on their shame for them. They deflected it onto you, and you're attending to it for them. So that's what's happening. And that's why it creates this obsession for that reason. Because they're just constantly offloading any authentic parts of themselves. They're constantly offloading that onto you. So you're getting authentic parts of them that they expect you to deal with. They're disowning these parts of themselves and assigning them to you. And this is why when they discard you or you leave them and then they start the smear campaign, it's like, I'm sure many of you notice this when you look at them, it's like they're all exactly the same. And not only are they all exactly the same, they're all exactly the same as the narcissist that you left, or the narcissist who discarded you. They're all exactly the same because they've all disowned any authentic part of themselves. It really all begins with the shame anyway, because it has to start somewhere and then you work your way up. You transmute the negative energy, the fear, shame, guilt, desire, all of this gets transmuted into the positive vibrations. But of course, that's not possible if you deny and suppress it, especially if you deflect it on someone else. instead what happens is that they remain shame-based, and that's why they're all pretty much the same, because it's all just a trauma response, and it's just shame-based behaviors. And it's all very restricted. When a person rises to the higher vibrations, then it's more free. It's about freedom. You're not trapped. And that's really when you get to know yourself on a very deep level. And then that's when you find your own identity. But because the narcissist and their flying monkeys, they're all shame-based, they're all very restricted, and they're all just extensions of each other. And they want you to be an extension of them as well. That's why they obsess over you. That's why they hold on to you. And it's kind of like you're like a balloon trying to float away. And they've got you tied to a rope and they're just trying to pull you down. Because when you're floating away, you're ascending, it sends a message back to them of just how low they really are. And you might think, why don't they just try to ascend as well? But they can't, because that shame is too painful for them to deal with. And perhaps the reason why it's so painful is because they're really like emotional toddlers in adult bodies. They haven't arrested emotional development. So just think of a child throwing a tantrum, trying to deal with their shame. It's very difficult. I mean, that's the whole point why when a child is upset, when they're hurt, when they're crying, they need their parents to help them to deal with those emotions, because it's too painful for the child to deal with. The problem is you also can't help the narcissist to deal with their emotions because they can't be vulnerable. So that's another problem as well, and it's kind of like the very things that the narcissist actually needs is what their disorder is programmed to block and deny more than anything. That's why you can't get through to them. But in many ways, they are their own worst enemy. They're doing it to themselves. They're damaging themselves. And as I've said before, you enable a narcissist, that's the most destructive thing you can do to them. It's just let them do what they want. Just let them get away with anything. Just have no laws, no rules. They'll just end up destroying themselves. And that's really what they do. When they run these smear campaigns, it's like they kind of think that they're untouchable, they're above the law. And just watch what they end up doing to themselves. They really go down, they degrade. And that's why they're really just trying to bring you down with them. They're trying to pull you down as well, like the balloon analogy. Like George Bernard Shaw says, never wrestle with pigs. You might get dirty, and besides, the pig likes it. And that's why they like it, because then it's like you're the same as them. But why are they trying to make you the same as them? They're trying to make you the same as them because you are not the same as them. It's a difference. I mean, otherwise, just think about it. If you were the same as a narcissist, if you were just as bad, wicked and crazy as them, what's the incentive? Where's the motivation to make them, to make you like them? That doesn't make any sense. The whole point of that is because you're not already like them. And also when they devalue you, the whole point of why they devalue you is because you're valuable. It's because they see you as being more valuable than them. That's why they have to put you down. Their actions reveal a lot about them. Their actions tell you everything that you need to know. It really gives it all away. But again, why can't they see that? Why can't they see that when they're devaluing you, when they're putting you down, why doesn't it reveal their own motives back to themselves? Why can't they see it? Why don't they feel embarrassed about it? The reason why is because when they're devaluing you, they're also deflecting their own shame onto you. So then they don't feel self-conscious, they don't feel the shame. But if you are aware of yourself, if you're connected to yourself, and I don't know, just give a hypothetical situation. Let's say you feel jealous or threatened about something, and then you go to devalue or grade someone else. If you're an empath, I mean, if you're not a narcissist, you're going to feel shame because of that. That's going to make you feel worse than before you said or did something. But it's not that same way for the narcissist, because they deflect the shame. And this is a continuous process which never ends. They're trapped in a cycle for the rest of their lives, continuously disowning parts of themselves and assigning them to someone else. That's how they survive emotionally. That's how they get by. But by doing that, they have no true identity. They don't even know who they are. And that's also another part of why they become obsessed with you, because they want to steal your qualities and traits. They want to steal your identity. And it may not be exact, but they do take bits and pieces of you in many ways. But they make it a part of them. And you know, it's not like some businesses, you know, they like to model other businesses, or if you have a role model as well, you might model them. It's not like that. With the narcissist, it's intended to deceive, and they often get involved with things that they have no interest in, that has nothing to do with them whatsoever. But just because they see it as being superior to them, worthy of respect and admiration, then they will take it on just for the image, in the hopes that it will increase their social position, or that it will get them money and resources. So that's why they do it. And of course, by doing that, they're just selling their souls. Quite literally, they are disowning parts of themselves. And that's how they have no true identity. They don't even know who they are. It's quite different if you actually have a genuine interest in something. If it's something that appeals to you, and it's not just about the image, it's not just about getting attention and admiration. Now that's a completely different thing, especially if you're using it to help people rather than to destroy them. But the way that narcissists go about it is very narcissistic, and that's how it's kind of like, for them, it's very unstable, it's very insecure, and they quite literally don't even know who they are. Their identity is tied to the group, to the flying monkeys, and that's really tied to you. It's tied to how you view yourself and how you feel about yourself. The narcissist and their flying monkeys, their identities are tied to how you see yourself and how you feel about yourself. And that's how they can change very easily. And this is why they're so obsessed with you, because that's how they manage their emotional states. It's how they manage these perceptions of themselves. But it may seem like the narcissist is so deeply involved and so concerned about their new supply and their flying monkeys, but actually no, they are separate they all have the same agenda, but then it's also a separate agenda because it's narcissistic. So it's not about the collective. It's kind of just like a free-for-all. It's every man for himself. And this is how they often do things that may sabotage other members of the group. They sabotage their own new source of supply. They may do things that are not in their interest at all. And they once did that with you. So what is it? Why are they so obsessed with you? Why does the narcissist develop this obsession? We have to remember what they're looking for. Narcissists need narcissistic supply. They need attention, validation, to validate the false self and make them feel like they're real, they exist, they matter. And with you being a grade A source of supply, when you rejected them, when you left them, they had to hold on to you. They couldn't just let you go because you made them feel real. They're obsessed with you because their false identity is tied to you. And that's why they're so concerned about what you're doing, how you feel. Because all of these things, it determines their emotional states and their perception of themselves. It's all based on you. In many ways, it's like you're the god. It's like you're the creator of their world. You're like their source of life. And you will see it because when they put you down, it's like they're elevating themselves at your expense. But even then, it's actually just an illusion of elevation. It makes them think they're elevating because they're putting you down at the same time. They haven't really gone anywhere. They've just managed to put you beneath them. But the narcissist's obsession with you, it really has nothing to do with you as a person. It's all about themselves. They're not connected to you, they can't connect to you. They can't know you, all they can do is mold you into whatever they think is going to benefit them. Whatever they think is going to make them look good to themselves. Because even when they're giving this image to people, it's all just so that people can validate it and so that the narcissist can feel good about themselves. Remember, it's narcissistic. Compared with such as yourself, you may be more empathic, and your image, I mean, we all have an image, your image, you are actually concerned with how people view you, not so much just so you can feel better about yourself, but maybe because you want to give other people the best of you. You want to give them a good experience, which is the opposite of narcissism. With narcissists, no. It's all about how they see themselves. As I've said before, they are trapped in a world inside their heads with a population of one. Well, as for us, I mean, we all have a world inside our heads, but we can invite people in. Because as empaths, we have a genuine care, a genuine concern of how people perceive us and feel about us. We do care about that because we want to give the best of ourselves to them. We want them to have a good experience with us. Of course, narcissists, they play on that and they target your self-esteem, they make you feel bad about yourself, make you feel small. But really, I think a big part of that is because they're envious and jealous, because they know that life will never be like that for them. And why would it be like that for them? Because they don't like the feeling of being self-conscious. The shame is too painful for them to deal with. They're shame-based people who are doing everything they can to avoid reflecting on their shame. And as I mentioned earlier, that shame, it's our identity, it's who we actually are. I mean, that's what it means when you're being self-conscious. It's reflecting on the shame, feeling insecure, feeling vulnerable. These things are very important. It's a big part of who we are. It's a big part of our identity. And these lower vibrational emotions, they're not bad as long as you accept them and you invite them in, because you can then transmute them into positive emotions. And again, this is why narcissism is self-destructive. But the narcissist will never identify this. They will never come to this conclusion, because there is such a low level of consciousness, but they don't want to accept that they're on such a low level of consciousness. They don't want to accept the shame. If they were to do that, then everything would change. They would heal. It would change their entire lives. And as I've said before, that is the major problem. It's their denial. It's the denial that prevents them from growing. The denial is the reason why they're so miserable, why they can't find satisfaction in anything in their lives. It's because of their denial. They denied themselves. They sold their own souls. They deny themselves. And through denying themselves, of course, naturally they will become obsessed with someone else. Because their perception of the false self and how they feel about themselves, that's then tied to you. So that's why they have to become obsessed with you as this source of their security and stability, as this emotional regulator. They're heavily dependent on you for all of that as their source of supply, so of course they're going to become obsessed with you. Now, I do know that this is very deep. Some deep talk, a deep discussion. But I think I put it quite simply towards the end. With how they deny themselves, they're in denial. Pretty much the same as them being shame-based, but doing everything they can to avoid reflecting on their shame, disowning parts of themselves, and then assigning them to you. And then that's how they become obsessed with you, because then their false identity, it revolves around you. And it just perpetuates it because they deflect it. They don't take accountability. Accountability is the key to our success. But I do think that's something wrong for them, because they see it as though accountability, that's bad. Owning yourself, that's bad. Maybe because they were a bit of a nuisance when they were younger, and they felt like they weren't good enough, they were bad, so they had to disown that. But for me, think it's very important to have that accountability, to own up to who we are, instead of running away from it. If anything, for me, and I'm sure it was this way for you, in my childhood I was blamed for everything. I was held accountable for so many things that I wasn't even responsible for. I was the scapegoat. And the scapegoat is really the only one who has that true identity, who knows who they are. They may not be conscious of it, but at some level they are authentic. And then they become an awakened scapegoat. And then once they awaken, it's all just about putting them back to sleep for the narcissist and the flying monkeys, because they don't ever want to wake up. They want to remain asleep for the rest of their lives. Again, that's why they become obsessed with you. Because you're like this tool, this vessel, so that they can stay asleep. But then you also have the power to wake them up, to blind them with your light. Of course, that's something they do not want you to do. They do not want to wake up. And I think that's a part of how, when they sold their souls, they just do not want to awaken to that. They want to remain asleep because it's just too painful. But I know it can seem creepy, weird when they're obsessing over you, they're stalking you. And you may just wonder what is going on with them. But that's what you've got to understand about people who are narcissistic. It has practically nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. That's the whole point of them being narcissistic, is that they're self-absorbed and they lack empathy. They can't feel what you feel, they can't share your experience. It's all about themselves. So it's kind of like a fantasy playing out in their heads, and unknowingly to you, you are a character in that. They have this mental snapshot of you, which really may not have anything to do with you at all. And if anything, it's kind of just based on their own shame. And that's how they become obsessed with you. It's not so much that you are this perfect, ideal character, or to the other extreme that you're the most horrible person in the world. It's neither of that. It's all just based on their own feelings about themselves, which they then put onto you. And that's how, when they're idealizing you, they're perfect too. But then when they're devaluing you, they're turning against you, it's because they feel like garbage. So then they're trying to devalue you, take value away from you, to bring you back down so that they can feel more comfortable. So it all just pertains to them and how they feel about themselves. Also, of course, it's the access that they have to you. It's how they're able to use you for that purpose, as this tool, this toy. So that's a part of it as well. But again, even them having that, when you enable a narcissist, when they're able to do what they do, it just damages them even more. They become even more lost. They don't even know who they are or why they're doing what they're doing anymore. It's just, it all just becomes a means to suppress you so that the truth doesn't come out about them. I see all the trolls already in the live chat. You know what I notice with these trolls is they always they put certain messages to kind of, it like catches you off guard when you see these opposing messages. And if I'm giving you my message, then it just kind of makes your mind go blank, especially if you're an empath, because of course you're wired to help people, to fix things and resolve things. You can see all of these nonsense messages in the live chat. I must say you look great these days. I mean, obviously that's completely opposing to what I'm talking about. I'm giving a deep, intelligent discussion, and then someone comments on your appearance. And then someone else says, I like your voice, can you do a backflip? I've seen people message that on many different accounts. But yeah, this is all just designed to kind of manipulate and exploit an empath. And it's also just designed to silence you. When you're dealing with narcissists and trolls, everything is manipulation. It's only ever going to be manipulation or an illusion, because if it's not, then they would have to connect to themselves and their true emotions, which means they would have to feel the shame. And that means they would feel very self-conscious around you. They would feel very insecure. And that is how you know when they're being real. But then also be careful, because some narcissists, they do use that as well. But I do think that this is enough, for now at least, that we've gone deep enough into this one for today. This is why the narcissist is obsessed with you. Let me know your thoughts about what I've said in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear from you as well. And please hit the thumbs up button, hit subscribe and click all notifications, and then you will be notified when I go live in the future. If you would like to donate, you can go to my PayPal. It is paypal.me/Narc Survivor. I appreciate all donations, no matter how small. And if you would like to book a one-on-one coaching session with me, just go to my website. It is narcsurvivor.co.uk. Also, check out my Instagram. I've been posting pictures and videos from my trip last year to Sri Lanka. I've already got over 500,000 plays on there, and so much more to come. Follow me on Instagram. It is Narc Survivor YouTube. Thank you all for joining me on another Narc Survivor live video. I appreciate all of you, and I look forward to speaking with you in another